wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV, Jess Hilarious, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. Lauren LaRosa filling in for Jess. We got some special guests joining us this morning. We got U.S. Representative Khanna from California. And we got J.A. Moore from South Carolina. Welcome.
South Carolina State Representative J.A.
right.
Moore.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
How y'all feeling to say?
Great to be on.
That's
Good
all
to
right.
be here. You guys have gone next level in terms of your show.
We've been working. You know, it's interesting. Every election season, you know, we're a stop for people. So I guess that's a good thing.
Great
You
thing.
know?
I think it's great. I mean, I was on, as you may remember, a couple of years ago during the pandemic. But since then, I think, people in the mainstream media now have figured out that they've got to come on this show, and they're listening.
That's a
Absolutely.
great thing. So what do you guys think about the rally over the weekend in New York at Madison Square Garden? What were your thoughts?
Here's the thing. Maya Angelou once said that words are things, and you got to be careful about how you use words. Now, I'm a free speech person, but that doesn't mean all speech is good speech. And we teach our kids to be thoughtful about how they use words because of respect. We have had this situation in this country that if you think something is funny, that somehow that's a license to insult people. Just because something is funny doesn't mean that you can denigrate people based on their race and gender and just say, oh, okay, I was just making a joke. I thought the vile attacks on racial groups in the context of a political rally was horrendous. And someone needs to say, yeah, okay, you can have humor, but not everything in this country can be justified just because it's funny.
I just thought it was bad politics. It's like, a week before the election, and you're going to need Latino people, you're going to need black people, you're going to need Jewish people, and you just put somebody up there to insult them. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just another misstep by the Trump campaign and Trump himself. It was a I don't know. I don't even know if it was desperate or not. It was just nuts. It didn't make sense. I don't know why you would, with all due respect, I'm a Knicks fan. With all due respect to New York, why you would do a rally in New York anyway when it's not a battleground state. It was a political. Didn't make sense. It was a terrible move on his part.
You what's the Stop Wall Street landlords like, bro?
What's going on right now is private equity, these big companies, they're buying up single-family homes, and they're buying up largely in working-class neighborhoods. And by doing that, they're making the prices of these homes go up, and they're making the prices of rents go up. And your and my tax dollars are subsidizing them. So this says stop giving them a subsidy. You shouldn't have Wall Street firms getting tax dollars to go buy up single-family homes. And by the way, they're doing them largely in black and brown communities across this country, and it's outrageous.
And so what are y'all trying to stop exactly?
Stop the subsidy. So
Okay.
right now, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae basically finance their loans. If they want to get a mortgage to buy up these homes, $400,000, $500,000, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae are giving them subsidized loans with your tax dollars. We're saying no subsidies, no tax dollar subsidies for them. The reason it started is after the 2008 crash, property values were totally depressed. And it made sense to say, okay, we needed some Wall Street investment to rebuild the home market. But that was 2008. It's now 2024, and the prices are through the roof. People can't afford houses. It's one of the two things we could do, the biggest things to get housing more affordable. One is to stop subsidizing private equity institutional investors. The other is to build more housing.
If you stop Wall Street from doing it, how do you make it to where people from the community can actually purchase those, not just purchase those homes, but have the equity to reinvest into those homes and, renovate them?
Well, that's a big question, why home ownership has gone down, the biggest source of wealth. Home ownership is about 62% in the white community, 45% in the black community. One, you need to build more homes so that you can bring the price down. But, the bottom line is you got to have higher paying jobs. I mean, you've had jobs in this country with the working and middle class stagnate in wages. And one of the reasons I wanted to come on, and J.A. and I have been working on, is, I represent Silicon Valley, $12 trillion of value, Apple, Google, Intel, NVIDIA. We've got to create those high-paying jobs in many other parts of America. You look at the bulk of wealth generation in this country over the last 40 years, a lot of it has come out of technology. And whether it's high-paying manufacturing or high-paying technology jobs, we've got to actually do that in communities so people can go have a salary to buy a house. Mm-hmm. We did a summit, Jaya and I and others, in Claflin with 40 historically black colleges and universities. We got Apple there, we got Google there, we got NVIDIA, we got Microsoft. They've created a program, 71% placement rate, 18-month course, 10 hours a week. You end up with a $65,000 to $100,000 job in different technology skills. It doesn't even require coding. We've got to create more opportunities for people to actually build wealth in a modern economy. That's how they're going to be able to afford housing.
What's your thoughts on, some people believe that these huge companies that you've named should be taxed more, and some people feel like they shouldn't be taxed as much, give them the tax benefits, because if not, they can take their business overseas. What are your thoughts on that?
They should be taxed more. I mean, look, we're producing in my district more wealth in one zip code than anywhere that has ever been produced in the history of humanity. You can tax these people more. Some of them aren't even paying some of the companies aren't even paying the full tax because they are avoiding through having some of their operations offshore. And certainly you can tax the stock buybacks that they engage in more. You can tax them once they are passing money down to their kids more, to provide people with the basic things: healthcare, education, childcare. But that's what Kamala Harris wants to do. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing: just taxing the wealth is not enough. Just taxing and redistribution is not enough. We've got to figure out in this country, how are we going to get people to actually build wealth? How are we actually going to get people to have good paying jobs? How are we actually going to have wealth generation opportunities? Why in the world is it that all of the wealth largely has been concentrated in a few cities? Why is it that we are fine with black people, with Latino people being users of technology? All of the clips you have, they go viral. They're all over. You wouldn't have social media if it weren't for the creators of content. Mm-hmm. But where are they in the boardrooms? Where are they in as founders? Where are they as venture capitalists? I taught at Stanford. My kids used to get funding before they had an idea. You know why? Because they had the right email address. Mm-hmm. Just like I had to fight to get on this show, Charlamagne's show. You got to know the right people. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of people have to fight to get in the room with the venture capitalists. They have no idea how to get funding. Now, why am I passionate about this? Because when the Indian American community came here, post-65, and there's a long history, and I'll just go into it for 1 minute, because Vice President Harris went to Howard University, and it gets to this whole Trump thing with are you South Asian or are you black? The reality is there's a deep tie. Mordecai Johnson from Howard University went to India. He learned about Gandhi. 1949, he's speaking at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. A young Dr. King is in the audience, and he talks about Satyagraha and the freedom movement. My grandfather spent 4 years in jail alongside Gandhi as part of the Indian independence movement. King and John Lewis take those teachings. King has a Bible and the Gandhi Reader with him at all times. If you go to his house today, it has those two books. And it leads to not just the Civil Rights Act, it leads to the 1965 Immigration Reform Act that allows my parents to come to the United States. Indians and others weren't allowed to come to the United States. You know who hires the Indian American community when we come here in terms of jobs? It's not Stanford. It's not Harvard. You know who hired Nikki Haley's father? An HBCU, historically black college. By the way, they hired all of the Jewish professors who came when they were leaving the Holocaust. That wasn't Harvard or Stanford. Now you look today. I'm a product of this civil rights movement. I wouldn't be born in the United States. My parents wouldn't be here. What is the endowment of Stanford University where I taught? $40 billion. You got 100 HBCUs. They've produced Dr. King. They've produced John Lewis. They've produced W.B. Du Bois. They've produced Thurgood Marshall. They've produced Kamala Harris. What is the endowment of all 100 of those HBCUs combined?
Nowhere near $40 billion.
$4 billion. Yeah. Has Stanford produced Martin Luther King? Has it produced W.B. Du Bois? No. They got $40 billion. The HBCUs have $4 billion. Mm-hmm. One 10th, all of them, of one university. And then they're wondering, why is it that we don't have economic opportunity in this country? So my view is, yes, you got to tax the people in Silicon Valley, but we need massive economic investment in these HBCUs in young people to give them an actual opportunity to build wealth.
But didn't Biden-Harris provide an additional funding of $17 billion for HBCUs?
They did.
Okay.
They did, but it was one time. It was an American Rescue Plan.
Gotcha.
And that's one of the things I think the vice president needs to talk more about, and she has.
I agree.
But it was one time. Why can't we have $10 billion a year for historically black colleges and universities? You know what we do? We say, oh, you're not at R1 school, Research 1 school. Well, how are you going to be in Research 1 school?
You don't have the resources.
Well, you don't have the resources.
Let me ask you a question, though, right? So I believe in you, and I feel like, especially our community, most of our generational wealth starts from home ownership, right? Passed down from generations to generations. One question I do have is sometimes when they put these laws into effect, it just doesn't affect the people they're trying to get. It affects other people. Let me break it down, right? So, for instance, my dad was a police officer. He retired. My mother worked at a life insurance company, didn't make a lot of money. They saved all their life. They bought their first house for $28,000, right? Lived in that house for 46 years. So now it's worth, let's say, $500,000, $600,000. When they pass, they paid taxes on that house. They paid everything that they needed to pay for the rest of their life. When they pass that house down to their child, they have to pay taxes on that. That child who gets that house has to pay taxes on that again. That's behind the buck for somebody that's trying to make it. Now, if this was somebody else, like let's say a Donald Trump that received $1 million loan and his family has wealth, I understand it. But how can somebody in these communities create wealth when they're getting taxed twice like somebody else? And they don't have the same tax breaks. They don't know the same accountants. That's my only problem when I hear some of these things, because I get it. Yes, people have to pay their fair share. But when you have people that come from those communities that are trying to create generational wealth for the first time millionaires, first time people making $500,000, it affects and hurt them as well.
Especially, too, because a lot of times in those situations, by the time it's passed down to that second or third generation, the mom, dad, grandmother may owe money that now you inherit, and it's a lump sum. So it's not just like, oh, I got to pay the taxes for this year. It might be like a lot of money that they just been figuring it out, and now you know, and now it's in your lap. And you got to figure that out, or you don't own that house anymore. So
what do you say to those people that's saying, like, yeah, I agree, but my mom just sold her, she paid $28,000, I sold it for $500,000, now they're taking 40% taxes on property that she already paid tax. How can they create generational wealth when they're starting behind the 8 ball already?
I hear you. I think we should have an exemption for passing down your actual house to family. Maybe exempt the first $2 million or up to $5 million, and we could figure it out. And that's not going to cost the federal government a lot of revenue. You know what's going on right now, because while you're taxing the guy you're talking about or daughter you're talking about who is getting a $500,000 house passed to them and they're having to pay tax, at the same time you got these multi-billionaires in my district in Silicon Valley. They buy Facebook stock for $1,000. That stock goes up to $100,000. They pass that stock. They don't pay capital gains tax on it. Then they pass that stock down to their kids, and their kids don't pay any of the appreciation. Mm-hmm. So you've got a rigged system that is hurting the working and middle class from building wealth and allowing the top 1% to continue to build without paying tax. Mm-hmm. And the Republicans are very clever. Every time we say we want to tax that top 1 or 10%, they talk about all the other 80%. They said your taxes are going to go up. What the Democrats have to say is, no, you're working class, you're middle class, you want to build wealth, we're going to give you an exemption. We're going to shift the tax burden to the multimillionaires who have benefited from this system. Mm-hmm. But one more point to you, and I'm all for home ownership. Mm-hmm. I think home ownership is, we've got to figure out more ways to get the disparity not to be 62% in the white community and low 40% in the black communities. But technology, here's what I fundamentally believe. It's a generational opportunity to overcome the racial wealth generation gap. One generation. The black community was excluded in the agricultural revolution with the loans from the USDA that were targeted. Excluded in the manufacturing revolution. Shame on us as a country in 2024 if we exclude communities from the digital revolution. there is an opportunity in one generation to build extraordinary wealth with AI, with new technology, with new industry. And that's what I want to try to say is, why don't we get these opportunities to more of the community so they actually can build wealth, that you never will overcome the racial wealth generation gap just with taxation and redistribution unless you overcome the racial wealth generation gap.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I'm here too. The work that Ro and I are working on, there's a nonprofit organization based in Charleston, South Carolina called the Next It Girl. And what it does is it works with girls from 8 to 22, black girls of color, introducing them to technology, careers, and concepts. It's a program that we're starting out in Charleston. There's branches in Atlanta, Georgia, and Indianapolis, Indiana. The work that Ro has been doing around connecting Silicon Valley with black and brown communities and rural communities all over the country is vitally important. We see the growth opportunities in technology, and we have to really invest in that. And let me go back to your other question about home ownership, and especially when you're talking about passed down economics, inheritance. One thing I also think we need to do, and this is the work I've been doing in South Carolina, is that we have to bring back financial literacy in our schools, especially for our community. I mean, sometimes we're like first-time home owners, and we don't really know all of the tax opportunities and loopholes, and not cheating on your taxes, but realizing that you may need to hire an accountant. And if your mama ain't had no accountant, how do you know that's an important part of being an adult? So working with financial literacy in our schools is vitally important. We need to invest in that.
I agree.
It's interesting, right? Because that's why I like the vice president's opportunity economy plan, because that's the type of conversations that she's having. Those are the type of conversations that she's been having. And it bugs me out, right? Because for the longest, we always thought the economy did better under Republicans. Like, I don't know why that's the narrative, but that's always been the narrative. But if you look, the economy, since World War II, the economy has always done better under a Democrat president. Why isn't that messaging out there more?
I wish it was. I know I've heard you say this a number of times. And what pains me the most in this entire election is that we're down 4 or 5 points on the economy. We should be up 10 points on the economy. And it's not rocket science. It's not just that, as Bill Clinton pointed out, there have been 50 million jobs created under the last few Democratic presidents compared to 1 million jobs created by the last a few Republican presidents. It's just look at the philosophy.
11 recessions, 10 of them have been Republican presidents.
But I think the problem too is I think as Democrats we tell the truth, and Republicans don't mind being dishonest. And they'll take ownership and credit for the work that we've done on a Democratic administration and Congress. For example, a perfect example is Trump with the stimulus checks, where it was
they're not afraid to cite it.
Yeah, like it was the Democratic Congress, Khanna and so many others that passed it, and all he did was sign his name on the front of it.
Good marketing.
That's a little savvy.
Yeah. But you look at it, let's say you're 25, 30 years old. You're thinking, okay, who's going to help me build wealth in this country? Now, what is Donald Trump actually? I know he's got all this BS platinum plan, but what is he actually offering? So he's going to give you tax cuts if you've already made it. Okay, fine. You're in my district. You got a job already making millions of dollars. He's going to cut your taxes. He's going to deregulate. Okay, how does that help you as a 25 or 30-year-old that he's going to cut regulations for some of these businesses? That's what he's going to do. And maybe he's going to put tariffs on for some of the products. So how does that help you? How does it actually help you build wealth? Now you look at the Democrats, the opportunity economy, what Kamala Harris is actually going to do. She's going to make sure that you have some shot of getting funding for your business, because you don't have the connections that Donald Trump or his people have to New York or Silicon Valley to get financing. She's going to actually make sure your business plan gets a look and gets you funding. She's going to make sure that we're investing in you and your kids to get a credential so you can actually get a good paying job in this country. Because Donald Trump's not putting $1 in actually getting you educated or getting the credential for getting that job. She's going to put financing to make sure that you get businesses in your community, and that off the tremendous federal contracting dollars that black and brown businesses start to actually get a fair share, not a disproportionate share, a fair share of those contracts. So I don't understand why this is even a contest. If you're just looking at it from a person of like, who's going to help me make more money? It's obvious that Vice President Harris is and the Democratic Party is. And there was once a New York Times article. I said, Americans love money. We should be the party that makes the case of helping them make more money. People said, oh, bro, this is too crass, too crude. I was like, no, it's not. We got a better plan.
Mm-hmm.
We got a better plan for people to build wealth.
I think a lot of it is profiling too, though, because when you think wealth, you think old white men. Mm-hmm. And that's the Republican Party. And I think they talk business a lot. Like they talk business. Democrats tend to talk people.
Well,
but that's because sorry to cut you off, but that's how we talk in a lot of our households too. Like we always are so faith-based, so much hope. Mm-hmm. You rarely, like, depending on what household you in, you might not ever have heard your mom talk about her accountant, or, you know what I mean? Like, depending on how you grew up.
And it's a challenge because I got a buddy of mine that I grew up with, and he's like riding on the fence whether he should vote for Donald Trump or not, which is insane to me. And what he's talking about is that this is the first time in his life, both him and his partner, they're both doing really well. They're finally making six figures. And they have this fake narrative that somehow the Democratic Party is going to take away they're going to pay more taxes on the Democrats, and that, you know, that inflation hasn't actually settled under this current administration. And so I'm having these conversations to like actually look at the policy, not what you're seeing on X or what you're reading, like, you know, reading on these blogs or YouTube. And what they don't realize is that a lot of that stuff is like this disinformation is like targeting specifically young black men to like be apathetic and not vote, or think somehow that the Democratic Party aren't supporting us, which we have been, or listening. You know what I mean? And listening or talking the language that we need to hear.
How do y'all feel with a week away from Election Day? How do you feel?
I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I think that I believe the young people are going to come out and vote for Harris. I think this thing is overblown in terms of just you would know more about the black vote, Latino vote. I mean, I know a lot of the men I meet, they're voting for her, black men, and a lot of Latino men are voting for her. So I think that she's going to win the Michigan, Pennsylvania. It's going to be close, but I think the polls actually are underestimating her support. And, you know, you made a great point about this image of why is it that we think traditionally of the Republicans as the business party? Because that's all that Donald Trump's running on. You know, frankly, if he had never had Apprentice, he never would have been president. Hate's not enough to become president. I mean, the Madison Square Garden stuff wasn't enough. It's because he had 14 years in people's living rooms as being this business guy and the Trump sign. And I think we've got to look, all the new wealth, the technology, the innovation, all of that's not being created by the old class. It's a whole new generation. It's a whole new group of entrepreneurs. I consider you guys entrepreneurs. That's the new wealth. That's the new innovation. And I fundamentally believe that's when Kamala Harris says she's for the future, that's what she represents. And I think that's the image that's going to prevail.
And I think it's going to come down to, maybe I'm biased because I'm from South Carolina, but I think if we win North Carolina and we win Georgia, we win. And I've had the pleasure of traveling. I just got back from Nevada. I mean, I feel cautiously optimistic. And everywhere I'm going, I'm in the Uber, and people, there's as much, the more Donald Trump talks and does crazy stuff like he did here in New York, the better Kamala Harris has. I mean, I feel good about it. I'm cautiously optimistic about it.
It's just interesting to me that, you know, with all of the things Trump has done, I don't even need to run down his whole resume, but when I just look at 2 impeachments, 88 criminal charges, 34 he was convicted of, to me, that alone should be disqualifying. Like, why isn't there anything that legally that prevents him from even being on the ballot? I know they got the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Yeah, but Supreme Court shot that down.
Well, you know,
left it up to Congress.
The people who let him off the hook were Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy. I remember talking to Kevin McCarthy after we impeached Donald Trump in the House. And I said, and Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell are talking about how terrible it was, what he did on January 6th. And I said, well, this is the reason we've got to convict him in the Senate. And I said, oh, Donald Trump's done. He's not coming back. His numbers were at 30% in the polls.
Wow.
They didn't think he would ever come back.
Wow.
And they let the guy off the hook in terms of if they had convicted him back then, he wouldn't have been able to run. And it was the biggest error. And I blame the Senate for not having the guts back then to convict him. But this point in the media, which I've heard you make a number of times, is that absolutely right. I mean, no one, they're asking Kamala Harris every detail of every plan. I'm fine. Mm-hmm. But no one is pointing out the fundamental point of the convictions and the illegality and the total shocking nature of Trump's candidacy.
I want to ask you about the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, because the Supreme Court, they say it's not up to the state. When the states are trying to take them off the ballot, it's not up to the states, it's up to Congress. Congress would have never done that because it was a Republican-led Congress at the time, right?
There was a Republican-led Congress at the time, and the Senate would never have done it. And the Senate was not even willing to convict him of the actual charges. Mm-hmm. And they all thought, by the way, McConnell, you asked them, I'm sure it'll come out when they're in their biographies, they all thought that what Trump did was an impeachable offense and convict him. But they said, why should we upset 30% of our base? Because his numbers were down at 30%. Mm-hmm. Why should we upset 30% of our base when the guy's going to go away anyway? Mm-hmm. And we're going to have a new generation, Nikki Haley, By the way, you remember Ron DeSantis was their big thing. Mm-hmm. They all thought Ron DeSantis was going to win. Yeah. They had written Trump off. They thought Trump would go away quietly. And that's why they didn't want to put their necks out to upset 30% of that base. And now
why did they think that? Because he never really went away. Trump has always just been around and doing things and saying things. He never really went away.
I think it was naivete. I mean, they looked at the poll numbers back then. Today, Trump's at 45, 46%. Back then, you look at the poll numbers right after January 6th, he was down at 30, 32, 33%.
But the fact that you would even have the power to make a January 6th happen, you have to know what you're dealing with. There's power in numbers of people. And just by words, he did that. So why would you think that he's just going to disappear and take a nap while we fix the world?
I think that's been the miscalculation of all of us over the past almost 10 years dealing with Donald Trump.
You thought he was going to go away?
No. I think we were all surprised that he even became president. Yeah, I think we too often have taken him too lightly because he's a buffoon, and there's no way they're going to nominate him again. He just lost.
That's so crazy.
Charlamagne and I was at Hillary Clinton's celebration party.
I knew,
right? We were there.
I knew that.
That never happened, but we were there. My kids were there. My family was there, and
that's why I'm scared to go next week.
Maybe you can stay home. You might be bad luck. Yeah, no, for real. Seriously, Charlamagne, please stay home.
We were there dressed up and everything.
Stay home.
I think the biggest problem is that nobody treats Trump like the actual threat that he is. The DOJ didn't treat him like that. The media doesn't treat him like that. Voters don't treat him like that. And so it's just if there's no consequences to your actions, what are we supposed to do?
And I think we also take for granted the segment of the population that he inspires. And I'm, the good people and all that, but it's something about that that 35% that you're talking about. They're not going anywhere. Mm. And if you have that kind of base, especially going into a primary, you're well positioned. And then so many other people, my colleagues, even at the State House in South Carolina, just all keep falling in line because they're so worried about their own political futures and not about the country. And I think all of us over these next 7-8 days left, we need to be aware of that. And no one can sit home. I'm telling all the brothers out there now that can hear me, don't have a non-vote protest vote against the Democratic Party. We can't afford to do that this time. And we just cannot afford to do it. And after this election, whatever grievance you had, if you voted just, and felt whatever, just take it up with the elected officials and hold us accountable once we get elected. Mm-hmm. Elect Kamala Harris on November the 5th and then hold all of us accountable as elected Democrats. I mean, that's my call for the brothers out there that can hear me.
And the media is scary. I mean, look at all these people, these billionaires who are owning the newspapers.
Washington Post, LA
Bezos,
Times.
And suddenly they're saying that, well, we may not want to endorse because Trump may win. Now, what does that bode in terms of the media actually standing up to him if he wins? This is the classic tactic of authoritarian leaders,
That's right.
that they intimidate any dissent. And it's not that people often wonder, well, how do they get to power? It's not that people suddenly all start rallying around them. It's that they get enough of a base rallying around them, and they put enough fear in everyone else to say, okay, we're going to, as long as they don't come after us, we don't want to get in the way.
That's right.
Well,
That's right.
go out and vote, and we appreciate you guys for joining us this morning. Really do. Thank you.
You got an election coming up too, right?
Oh, yeah, November the 5th. I'm on the ballot too, guys. J.A. Moore, state representative.
Hey,
In South Carolina.
South Carolina, and of course Representative Roques.
What about
Thank
you,
you guys
Ro?
for joining us.
I do too in California, and we got to win, not just my city, we got to win four Democratic House seats out of California to take back the majority so we can have Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker of the House.
All right.
That's right.
Well, it's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.
Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.